And I read some of the stuff you said about you don't think that we gave enough attention to finding Dylan yesterday. Are you kidding me? I devoted 2 hours of national television time to try to find your son. And I have asked you to do things to eliminate yourself so we can direct resources to other people, and you won't do one damn thing to help. And you want to criticize what we're doing?
I think that was taken out of text, and I didn't have this
then
conversation.
You put it in context.
I put it in context. I was referring specifically to the conversation that was taking place on the stage with you and my ex-wife together.
What you do with your ex-wife and what you do with your son, you've got years of history before you get here with me. Okay. Don't lay that at my feet, my friend.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining me as we begin today. That was a clip of Dr. Phil and Mark Redwine talking about his son Dylan and his son Dylan's disappearance. And we're going to cover that today. We're going to cover the tragic disappearance of Dylan Redwine and the events surrounding it, what happened to him and what happened to Mark Redwine following Dylan's disappearance. So we're going to dive into it pretty quickly today. I just want to say thank you for joining me. My name is Travis Fenn. I am your host here on Beneath the Shadows. I appreciate you being here, whether you're a first-time listener or whether you're coming back after another episode, you know? It really means a lot to me, and I can't say how much I appreciate you all. If you haven't had the chance, please go rate and review the show. It helps so much, and I appreciate everyone who has taken the time to do it. I know there's not a ton of listeners so far, but I'm going to keep pushing with the show and keep trying to put out some really awesome episodes that are intriguing and interesting and hopefully enough to keep some of you coming back week after week. For now, though, we are going to be kind of slowing down on releasing episodes. It's not going to be weekly. It's going to be bi-weekly. I just need to get more support for the show to focus more energy on it. I've been putting a lot into the show for the first 6 months here, and I have not gotten any feedback. I have not gotten any following. I have not really had much success with trying to build some community around the show. So until I get a little bit more support, a little bit more recognition, some more people listening, we're going to have to dial back the show just a tiny bit to every other week. I'm going to try to put a little bit more detail into the shows now, but we'll see exactly how it goes. So with that, recording here from the Shadow Realm, my office studio in Ypsilanti, Michigan, we are now going to dive into the story behind Dylan Redwine and his father, Mark Redwine. So Mark Redwine would live in Vallecito, Colorado, and Vallecito is a large scenic mountain lake city town. So it's often referred to as Vallecito Lake because that's the big aspect or the big feature within Vallecito. But there's Vallecito. It's a large scenic mountain town in southwest Colorado and is located 18 miles northeast of Durango and is known for its beautiful views and diverse recreational opportunities, including fishing, boating, and hiking. Vallecito has approximately 400 to 500 full-time residents and 2,000 summer-only residents. So a very small town where apparently some terrible shit can happen. Located at 8,000 feet above sea level, Vallecito is nestled in the San Juan National Forest and near the Weminuche Wilderness area. One of the largest and most beautiful bodies of water in Colorado, Vallecito Lake really is just, gorgeous. I mean, if you look at pictures of it, there's this lake that sits down this little valley area, and that's actually what the name means, is Little Valley, and it's often referred to as Lake of the Little Valley, but the Vallecito Lake is beautiful. There's mountains surrounding it on all sides. There's 12 miles of shoreline that are just gorgeous. There's tons of recreational activities like boating, fishing, kayaking, paddleboarding, hiking, picnicking, whatever the fuck you want to do. And that's just summertime. In the winter, you could do ice fishing, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing. There's just so many different opportunities that present themselves for recreational activities outside. It looks like a gorgeous place, and if I ever get the chance, I'd love to visit there. It's just, yeah, like I said, looks beautiful, and for being southern Colorado, where a lot of people don't think it's as scenic, more of like flatlands and kind of New Mexico-ish is kind of how it seems when a lot of people talk about southern Colorado. It looks gorgeous. It looks beautiful. Vallecito Lake is known for its diverse fish population, including brown trout, rainbow trout, smallmouth bass, northern pike, walleye, and salmon. Kokanee? 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 Salmon. And then the lake also has a marina for boat rentals, so go out there, get your fucking ass out there and enjoy some scenic, beautiful recreational activities in Vallecito if you ever have the chance. There are nearby, there are a ton of different national forests and monuments and stuff nearby. San Juan National Forest, the Weminuche Wilderness Area, like I mentioned, Mesa Verde National Park, Chimney Rock National Monument, Durango Bayfield, the Lemon Reserve, and the San Juan Skyway Scenic Byway. So just so many different places to go that are nearby Vallecito where you can just get the beauty of Colorado and take in that beauty. So, with a little bit of the background on Vallecito, let's now dive into Mark Redwine, Dylan Redwine, the Redwine story, and what happened on that tragic night in 2012. So yeah, that clip at the beginning from the Dr. Phil show was obviously Dr. Phil, and then it was Mark Redwine. And Mark Allen Redwine, was born in North Carolina on August 24th, 1961. His father's name was Harlan Randolph Redwine, and his mother is Phyllis Elaine Steinman, also Redwine after they got married. Mark Redwine was a long-haul trucker who drove thousands of miles all throughout the United States. Mark would have 4 children with 2 different women. Mark would marry Elizabeth Jean Horvath on May 24th, 1984 in Nevada. Brandon Redwine was born the same year in 1984, and Mark Allen Redwine Jr. was born in 1986. The marriage would last 6 years, and Mark and Elizabeth divorced in 1990. Mark was not a great father from all accounts, and he would oftentimes only communicate with his sons when he needed something from them. So, he's only around if he can benefit out of it, not just for the kids' sake or anything of that nature. It's only if he can really get something beneficial out of it, he would come around if he needed something, whatever. In November of 1991, Mark would remarry, this time to Elaine Susan Hall. Now, his 2 younger sons would be born. Corey Allen Redwine. Too many Allens. Why are you naming your kids Allen as their fucking middle name? Just one. Only one. Don't name your kids the same first name, middle name, nothing. Just fucking different names. Just do different names. It's so easy. Corey Allen Redwine was born in 1991, and Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born on February 6th, 1999. He will be the center point, the focus of our episode today. Eventually, the strains of life would take their toll. Mark and Elaine would separate in 2005 and would be officially divorced in 2009. Mark was a non-consistent parent, as I had mentioned, and only saw the boys occasionally. He would randomly show up to have lunch or dinner, or maybe to take them on a sporadic vacation. He would, randomly take them here or there, go away for a couple of days, maybe just take them out to lunch. No consistency at all, so it's very stressful, very irritating, and very hard on the children, honestly. He would randomly, I already got that. Several witnesses would also eventually testify to Mark's alcohol abuse. Apparently him and Elaine both drank quite a bit, Mark more than Elaine, but they both had their own issues with alcohol as it went, and this would cause Mark to be a little bit more emotionally abusive also, which tends to kind of go hand in hand. If you are already that kind of person and then you abuse alcohol, you're probably going to exacerbate some of those tendencies that you have to be like emotionally abusive or physically abusive. If you already have those issues, it'll probably exacerbate those. Additionally, after the divorce, Mark would often speak negatively about Elaine and her new husband, Mike Hall, to the boys. Though he irregularly used his visitation rights, it infuriated. Holy shit, I can't say that word. It infuriated Mark when Elaine would interfere with his time to see the boys. And at this point, when the story is kind of happening, Corey is now older than 18, so he doesn't have to deal with Mark. And Mark's main focus would be on Dylan, who was approaching his teen years. Dylan, who I mentioned was Mark and Elaine's youngest child, was a 13-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who was born on February 6, 1999, as I had previously stated. Dylan was similar to many young teens. He loved texting with his friends and playing video games during his free time. Dylan also loved baseball, as it was his favorite sport, but he played football quite often as well. Dylan's parents, Mark and Elaine Hall, it was Mark Redwine and Elaine Hall. It was Elaine Redwine at the time. She got married after and is now Elaine Hall. Whole convoluted thing, but they had gone through their bitter divorce, and there was a significant tension between Dylan and his father after the divorce. And it would only build and build and build and get worse and worse as the years went on following the divorce, especially leading up to 2012, when all of this story would happen. When most of this story would happen, there was a lot of different events that led up to it that only put more strain onto the relationship between Mark and Dylan and his father. The divorce would also result in a custody dispute, and Dylan would have to talk to the court regarding his interests and wants regarding the matter. So he would talk to them, and he would actually state that he did not want to be with his father, that he would prefer to live with his mother and go to school where she is at, and that is in Colorado Springs, or right around the Colorado Springs area, which is about 6 hours away from Vallecito and the Durango area where Mark is located. Mark lives in this little shack cabin thing, little house tucked up in the hills in Vallecito. It's north of the lake there. So you have Vallecito Lake, and then he lives north of that. If you look for it, there's a place called Middle Mountain Road, which is where a lot of this today's episode takes place. But he lives just west of Middle Mountain Road, pretty much the next road over to the west. He lives up that road quite a ways. So he's very rural, very out there, away from the city, away from people. There's not many people around, as one of the neighbors would even say. There's not a whole lot going on. It's very dark out there at nighttime. If there's a light on, you can see it for miles and miles and miles. It's just a very, rural area and very laid back area where you're hanging out in nature. And it sounds like a great place, but Dylan would hate going out there compared to other places, because he was so far, compared to going to his mother's, because he was just so far tucked away from his friends, and he had to rely on Mark, his father, to go anywhere. So after the divorce, Mark would take the children, Corey and Dylan, on road trips from time to time to see different baseball stadiums and NASCAR tracks throughout the United States. Mark would mention in an interview that he wanted to take Dylan to every track and every stadium in the U.S. It's something that he wanted to bond with them over. He felt it was something that could keep them connected in some way, and he was really trying to put his best foot forward and take them places where they may not have the chance to go again, at some point. So he wanted to really take them around the U.S. to different stadiums, different baseball stadiums, and different NASCAR tracks, and see different teams play, see different places, see different races happen, all these different things. He was really trying to put his best foot forward and keep intact a dying relationship with his kids. And even after Corey got old enough and stopped wanting to go on these trips, I feel like that kind of swayed Dylan to not want to go on them even more than he previously didn't want to. There was always some strain between the kids and Mark, and when Corey stopped wanting to go on these trips or stopped going on these trips, it just put more strain and more tension on Dylan and Mark and their relationship. It was during one of these trips in 2011 that Dylan would make a disturbing discovery, a fucking horrifying discovery, honestly. If you're just chilling and looking at a laptop and you see this shit, that involved his father. The discovery was of some filthy photos, and filthy is goddamn the right word, for sure the fucking right word, located on Mark's laptop in the trash can. Dylan had used his laptop while they were staying at a motel and while Mark slept, and he would find these photos on there, and he would show his brother Corey, who was with him at the time. Corey would later testify that Dylan was creeped out and disgusted by the photos. I understand completely. We'll discuss those photos in just a little bit, exactly what they were and what he saw. And I'm going to, put these photos up I'm really looking to get the website up in the next month or so, and when I get that website up, they'll be on there in a little section about each episode that we have. It was during one of these trips also that Mark would say degrading comments about Elaine Hall and Mike Hall, and once Corey stopped joining them, he would also talk bad or talk negatively about Corey as well. And this fucking pissed off Dylan. And I understand, you have a really close relationship with your brother, and then when he's not there, your father's talking shit about him. That's irritating, that's annoying, that's fucking stupid as all hell can be, and definitely, like I said, infuriating more than anyone could probably imagine. I mean, you have to think about someone that you really enjoy and then picture someone who you didn't like talking shit about them and how you would feel about that, because that's pretty much what was going on. Before his visit for Thanksgiving in 2012, Dylan had expressed reluctance to see Mark, even texting his friends that he did not want to go and hoped to spend as little time with his father as possible. So, after the meeting with the court in 2012, when Dylan expressed his want to live with his mother and ended up eventually, the court decided that he would live full-time with his mother, where she would have custody of him, full-time custody. That was before this trip, and during that court hearing, Mark would request that Dylan would come out for Thanksgiving that year, which was in 2012. And before this visit to his father's for Thanksgiving, he expressed a lot of reluctance to go and see Mark, that he didn't want to go out there, and would talk even with his mother and his stepfather about whether or not he actually had to go. And due to the court order, his mother and his stepfather were legally obligated to send him to go and see his father. And if they didn't do that, they would end up in contempt of court or would end up in jail. And that's just a whole convoluted issue and another matter to discuss entirely. So that would lead to November of 2012. November of 2012 is where everything would start, where all these events would kind of trickle into motion and would eventually lead to the disappearance of Dylan. And we'll dive into that right now. So after the court appearance and Dylan talking with the judge about whether he would want to live with his mom or dad, and expressing that he wanted to live with his mother, which was in, I believe, the summertime of 2012. It was like end of summer, maybe September. But either way, after that, Dylan did not talk to his father at all. His father would try to contact him. He tried to text him. He tried to call him. Dylan would ignore all of his attempts. There we go. Dylan would ignore all of his attempts at communication and would not respond to him. There was numerous texts that were sent that was just Mark trying to contact him. Hey, how are you doing? Hey, what's this? Hey, what's that? Can I get this from you? Do you want to talk at all? Mark was trying to, contact him, but it was more like, hey, could I get this? Hey, could I get that? Or there was like, Dylan would try to contact Mark the one time at least and try to get a PIN for a debit card off of him, and there was no connection between them. Dylan didn't want to talk to him, and Mark would only contact him to try and get stuff from him. And even when Dylan was supposed to go out there for Thanksgiving in November of 2012, and Mark was trying to contact him about making travel arrangements or talking to him about when he would want to come out exactly. He still didn't respond. Dylan didn't respond to him, and Mark would eventually have to email Elaine about Dylan's travel plans and what Dylan had planned for the visit to Vallecito for Thanksgiving in 2012. So Dylan was originally supposed to fly out on November 17th, 2012 to get to Mark Redwine's home in Vallecito. He would land in Durango, Mark would pick him up, and they would go to Vallecito where Mark lived. But his flight was delayed and ended up getting canceled or moved to November 18th. So that night, Dylan would stay with his friend Joe and one of Joe's friends or one of their friends, and they had a little get-together, sleepover, slumber party type of thing, whatever you want to fucking call it. But he would end up staying there for the night on November 17th, and then on November 18th, 2012, Dylan arrived at Mark Redwine's home. That evening after he arrived, Mark would pick him up from the airport, and there would be surveillance footage that showed Dylan and his father at a Walmart store, and later, Dylan was seen at a McDonald's. Mark then claimed that they returned home and Dylan fell asleep on the couch while watching TV. The next morning, Mark said he left early to run errands and that Dylan was gone when he returned. So Mark said he had left in the morning, he went to run errands, went to stop at his job, and then when he had left, Dylan was asleep on the couch, but when he returned, Dylan was gone. Dylan had left the house, or Dylan was gone for some reason, and Mark knew Dylan had plans with his friends. Dylan was supposed to meet one of his friends at 6:30 that morning, like very, very early. He did not want to be around Mark. He expressed that, relentlessly. He kept telling everyone, all of his friends, everyone he knew, except for Mark, that he did not want to be there. And he wanted to go to his friends as early as possible. In reality, he even wanted to spend the night at his friend's house the night of November 18th when he got to Vallecito. He did not want to stay with his father. He wanted to go and stay at his friend's house, which, isn't uncommon for teenagers, but with the stress and the strain between Mark and Dylan, there was also just pushing Dylan even further away from Mark, and he did not want to be with Mark, especially by himself. If, Corey was there or someone else was there, maybe he would want to be there, but it was just Mark and Dylan. Just Mark and Dylan hanging out at that house. Nothing in common, nothing to talk about. They didn't really like each other. Dylan definitely didn't like Mark, and he didn't want to be there. So he knew that Dylan had plans with his friends, he knew Dylan had plans with his friends, as I had mentioned, and even though his friends said they hadn't heard from him, he assumed that Dylan had left the house and started to walk to one of his friends' houses, or possibly maybe went fishing somewhere, and that's why Dylan wasn't at home when Mark returned. He just assumed that he, packed up his shit and started walking to a friend's, or maybe went fishing, or something of the nature. He just got out of the house early so he didn't have to deal with Mark, and Mark kind of just assumed that was the case. Didn't really worry about it, and actually went and took a nap after that. He just got home, he took a nap, he was like, he's probably around, or he'll be back soon, or I'll hear from him, relatively soon. So at about 4 p.m. on that same day, the 18th of November in 2012, Mark would text Dylan's mother, Elaine, and would ask if she had heard anything from Dylan that day, if she had heard from him at all that day on November 18th. Mark explained that he had run errands in the morning, like I said, and that he had not seen or heard from Dylan since he had gotten home. After being contacted by Mark, Elaine immediately started texting Dylan. When she received no answer from him, she sprang into action. Herself, along with her husband Mike Hall and her son Corey, hopped into a car and started driving the 6-hour trip towards the Durango, Vallecito area. They would arrive that evening around 11 p.m. She also would file an official missing persons report with the La Plata County Sheriff's Department, but the anxiety grew as the time and miles passed. What could have happened to Dylan? Where could he have gone? Was there a disagreement or argument? Why wasn't he responding? There were so many questions. Dylan was last seen wearing a Dylan Dylan was last seen wearing a white devil, Dylan was last seen wearing a white Duke Blue Devils baseball hat. Jeez, I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. A black Nike t-shirt, black sports shorts, tennis shoes, and a black backpack. A postal worker, Angela Lee, would mistakenly believe she had seen Dylan and one of his friends walking on the road later in the day that he went missing. On November 18th, she thought she saw them in the afternoon around 1 or 2 p.m. that day. But she was incorrect, and the children that she saw were both identified. Within 24 hours, friends and family would be searching for Dylan throughout countless areas in and surrounding Vallecito. On the contrary, Mark Redwine would be seen the following morning on his porch, coffee in one hand, sitting on a chair, doing the exact opposite of everyone else. Mark would say that the police told him not to look for Dylan and that he should let the police take care of things. Which, I mean, maybe they did, like, try to interfere as least as possible, at least with the physical aspect of it. But, I mean, you're looking for a missing kid. The parents are going to get out there, going to fucking look for him, whether the police tell him or not. Generally, the parents are going to want to contribute as much as fucking possible to finding their kid. And Mark was just like, cool, I don't have to do shit. I'm going to sit back and relax on my porch then, drink this coffee, and watch all these fuckers search while I sit here. Fucking asshole. Corey, Dylan's brother, would be infuriated with Mark's lack of involvement in searching for Dylan. Because, like, throughout the whole entire search for Dylan, the entire time, the year plus looking for him, you know, the numerous months, the numerous searches, Mark would just be very lackluster and non-involved with all of it. Numerous times, Corey would invite Mark to go out and search with him, but Mark did not reply. Consistently, Mark's actions, or lack thereof, were questionable, to say the least. La Plata County Search and Rescue began their search in common areas near Mark's house, such as fishing spots and sections of the lake. This was partially due to Mark telling the police that Dylan's fishing rod was missing, and also because of Dylan's last ping on his cell phone, which was right around the Vallecito Lake area. One of the times Mark was helpful, it involved planning a committee that included himself, his half-brother David Stone, his son Corey, his eldest son Brandon, and Corey's stepdad Mike Hall. This planning committee would meet to strategize on different ways that they could employ to find Dylan. So different strategies that they could take to help locate and find Dylan. And according to the others, Mark showed no sense of urgency in finding Dylan and would sometimes make uncertain comments, such as those about blunt force trauma. So weird, odd comments that he would make during these committee meetings. And he didn't really show any sense of urgency in finding his son, didn't seem to really care, was very lackluster about it. And that was, you know, triggering and signs that maybe he knew more than he was letting on. Elaine's friend, Denise Hess, would build and run a social media campaign following Dylan's disappearance. She would help arrange vigils, protests, and interviews. In February of 2013, family, friends, and supporters protested in front of Mark Redwine's house since Mark was, you know, consistently refusing to really help, to do much, and the suspicion started to grow more and more and more. His story didn't really add up. It didn't make sense, especially to the ones that knew Dylan. People knew that Dylan likely would never go off on his own to go fishing. He didn't really enjoy fishing. He enjoyed riding around in a boat. He enjoyed being out on the water, but he didn't really enjoy fishing and definitely wouldn't go by himself because he didn't know how to set up the line properly. He didn't know how to hook up the hooks, the bait, the weights. He didn't really understand how to do all of that and didn't care enough because he didn't like fishing. So if it wasn't involving being on a boat, going out in the water, he probably wouldn't go by himself. And everyone knew that, but Mark still continually pushed the notion that he maybe went fishing or maybe walked miles and miles to one of his friend's house. Mark was pissed off at Denise for doing this and how she was helping with the case. So she was helping with the case, and Mark was pissed because a lot of the stuff that was getting put out there pointed to Mark as knowing more than he was letting on. At one point, Mark angrily spatted, "I hope the cancer kills you," which Denise Hess was battling cancer, referring to Denise's ongoing battle with cancer, which would eventually take her life before the trial would begin. So she would end up dying from cancer, and Mark would say while she was still alive that he hoped the cancer would kill her, which it eventually did. The case would garner national attention, the trial, and Denise would help spring an appearance by the family on the Dr. Phil show in February of 2013. It was the 26th and the 27th of February in 2013, and that's part of the clip that we heard earlier in the show was from that appearance. Elaine, Corey, Mark, and Mark's previous girlfriend, Karen Alexander, would appear on the show, along with a clip of the postal worker, Angela Lee. And Angela Lee did not want that clip to appear. She didn't want to be on the show, but they still used it, and she was kind of pissed off about it because she didn't know how it would affect her life or her work situation if they would disapprove of her being on the show or getting involved in this case. So she was trying to distance herself from it after she found out that she didn't identify the right kids. So she didn't want to be on the show, but they still used a clip because they had interviewed her and had the clip available. Mark would continuously display verbal and nonverbal cues throughout his investigation or the investigation into him. His body language was displaced or misaligned with the words that came out of his mouth. So he would say things that were like, this happened or that happened or maybe this happened, and he would be saying something and his head would be shaking or his head would be nodding, or he would make subtle eye movements or mouth twitches, things of that nature that were very subtle and some people might not notice, but were definitely tells that he knew, as I've been saying, more than he was letting off. He definitely had a lack of concern and did not express an interest in finding Dylan the way everyone else had. Mark had a remarkable lack of concern, and it started to show to everyone around him, including the police. While Dylan was still missing, by the end of November 2012 and June 2013 in that area, Mark drove to Bayfield, Colorado, where witnesses saw Mark throw away a garbage bag. Oh no, what could be in the bag? Bayfield is not terribly far from Vallecito, about 18 minutes, 13 miles away. But it didn't make sense why Mark would go so far out of his way to throw away some garbage. The witnesses reported the suspicious activity to the police. When the police got to the dumpster and retrieved the bag, the contents would be suggestive of wrongdoing and would not project a redeeming light on Mark in any way, because the contents were kind of fucking horrific. They weren't anything, gory or terrifying in that sense, but what was inside was so meaningful that the fact they threw it away was just a telltale sign that he was fucking guilty of something. Inside, photos of Dylan with long hair from more recent years and pictures of Elaine were found. So, photos of Dylan in more recent years where the disconnect started to grow between Mark and Dylan. During those years, he threw away photos from that time, and then photos of Elaine that, were from previous times or previous periods of time that showed him with Elaine or Dylan with Elaine or just Elaine by herself. He threw all of these photos the fuck away in a dumpster in Durango, which is over 10 miles away from his own house. Very strange, very odd behavior, and while not a certain sign of guilt, it is hard to put that aside as just being another action someone does when they're grieving for their child who is missing, because that's not usually what someone would do. Also found was Mark's older driver's license, which was kind of weird, but it was just another piece of evidence that was in that bag. It is speculated that as Dylan grew older, he began to look more and more like Elaine, and this caused further resentment and strife to brew within Mark. Mark would claim that he manufactured the photos and left them out to determine if Corey and Elaine were breaking into his home and stealing stuff. So he would tell, I think it was Dr. Phil, that he set up these photos. He manufactured these photos. He set them up. He left them out to see if Corey and Elaine were breaking into his home and stealing stuff. And he ended up throwing them away because they didn't end up stealing them, pretty much. It was the stupidest thing in the fucking world and doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. So he would end up throwing away these photos, and that was some damning evidence and would really hit jurors hard when they heard about it. So during the time that Dylan was missing, during the time that he had disappeared, the police would interview numerous people, including Mike Hall, which was their stepfather, Leah Hall, which was Leah Howard, which is Elaine's sister, Joe Sabias, which is Dylan's friend, who he spent the night with on the 17th when his flight was canceled, Sean Bourne, which was Mark's coworker, who he saw the morning of the 19th when Mark left the house to run errands, and Karen Alexander, which was Mark's previous girlfriend who he had dated for 6 or 7 months. They would interview all these people and get statements from them, and we'll cover some of their statements in just a minute here. For months, search efforts in the rugged, mountainous terrains around Vallecito Lake turned up nothing, but then on June 28th, 2013, 7 months after Dylan vanished, some of his remains were found about 10 miles, it was 8 miles technically, away from Mark Redwine's home. These pieces included a partial skull and the tibia, femurs, the left clavicle bone, and some of Dylan's toes. His toes were the only remains with flesh still intact, so the last skin, flesh that he had were on his toes. No other flesh was found, it was just bones beyond that. The remains were found scattered, suggested that they had been moved by animals or human interference. These remains were found during a planned 5-day search of the area of Middle Mountain Road and the surrounding locations. During the search, Dylan's shoe, one of his socks, and his headphones were also found. Beyond that, it wasn't until November of 2015 that Dylan's skull cap, his Calvaria, his Calvaria was discovered in a different location over a mile away uphill from the rest of his remains. It was near a few streams and by an animal den, possibly a coyote of some sort, and it was found by Leah and Daniel Foster. They were out hiking around, looking for a place to go, and ended up finding the skull cap of Dylan. Which is, if you took off, like, the face bones, if you literally, like, cut the top of your head off, like, at your forehead, above your eyebrows, cut that straight off is pretty much what they found. Just the top, just the cap of the head, the skull. Forensic analysis revealed fractures and injuries consistent with blunt force trauma. Blunt force trauma, there we go, there's that word, that phrase again. This was a crucial piece of evidence in building a case against Mark Redwine, though it was theorized that an animal, such as a cow, may have stepped on and been responsible for fracturing the skull. So it was theorized by the defense that maybe there was animals in the area that could have stepped on the skull or stepped on these pieces of bone and caused them to fracture, but the coroner said that that was probably not the case. The forensic analysis revealed that it was likely not due to an animal and more of a sharp instrument or a sharp corner of something that used force to break and crack and fracture the skull. So like I had mentioned, there was a bunch of interviews and statements gathered by police during the time that Dylan was missing, and even after the fact, after he was found, there was a lot of interviews done then to try and really determine what happened to Dylan and how he ended up out in the wilderness, dead, and how his body had been decomposed. Obviously, he had been out there for months and months. Obviously, animals had gotten to him. What had happened, and what could people provide? What statements and stuff could they provide to give some insight onto the family, onto Mark, onto Dylan, and what could have happened here? So they talked to Karen Alexander, which was Mark's previous girlfriend. She and Mark dated for 6 or 7 months. She testified that she, Mark, and Dylan hiked Middle Mountain Road, which took them over 3 hours. It's a steep road. It's a windy, curvy road that hikes up the mountain. It looks like it's a beautiful road. It looks like it would be a beautiful place to hike. It would be awesome to go up. She said that they went out to shoot guns and that Dylan would go off on walks on his own as well as with friends. Dylan would also occasionally play football, one of his favorite sports, in the front yard with Mark. She also claimed that Dylan would go off and fish on his own behind Mark's house, and that he would often sleep on the couch watching Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. This would all, eventually help Mark in his defense, all this information. She even made an appearance on the Dr. Phil show with Mark when the whole family went on to talk about and pray for Dylan's safe return home. When that was in the beginning of 2013, before they found the remains, they would go on Dr. Phil, and she joined Mark for who fucking knows what reason, because she thought Mark was innocent, because she didn't believe all the rumors and the strife that was really coming at him from Elaine and Corey and that side of the family, and all the people who didn't believe in Mark, and all the people who were accusing Mark of this and that. I don't think she wanted to believe it or didn't believe it, and that's why she joined him on the Dr. Phil show. Next was Sean Bourne. Sean Bourne, Mark's coworker, claimed that he could not understand why Mark was in the office on the morning of November 19th. He said that Mark was there sometime between 9 and 11 a.m. Mark had no appointment scheduled, and he had left his job early the previous day to go and spend time with Dylan. Sean would claim that Mark looked unkempt, tired, and haggard. That Mark looked awful, like he had been up with no sleep after an all-night bender. With an unshaven face, droopy eyes, and no shower, Mark was an unforgettable sight for Sean. So Sean would testify that he didn't know why the fuck Mark was at work, and that Mark looked like absolute fucking dog shit, like he hadn't slept at all. So, not a good look for Mark. Joe Ceballos, who was Dylan's friend, who he spent the night with on the 17th after his flight was canceled, they would take the last photos of Dylan Redwine beyond security footage from Walmart and McDonald's, which Dylan and Mark had stopped at when Dylan first arrived in Vallecito, so they were caught on security camera at Walmart and at McDonald's when Dylan had first arrived in Vallecito. But beyond that, Joe, Dylan, and one of their friends would take the last photos of Dylan while he was alive. Joe would testify that Dylan did not want to go and see his dad, as he told everyone. In fact, the only part Dylan was looking forward to was seeing his Bayfield friends. So his friends that were in the area of Vallecito, Durango, Bayfield, Dylan was looking forward to seeing those friends, but beyond that, had no ambition, no want, no interest in going out there to see his dad, to hang out with his dad, to be out in that area. Leah Howard, who was Elaine's sister, she stated that Mark was emotionally abusive. She also claimed that he would regularly cheat on Elaine and used alcohol and drugs frequently. Leah would say that Dylan loved Mark when he was young, but as the boys grew up, the distance between them seemed to grow as well, which is, it's a common thing as kids come into their teens to want to have more independence and freedom away from their parents, but there's usually some love and respect that's still there, and that seemed to pretty much disappear, especially in the recent years leading up to 2012. Mark really just kind of abandoned his post as a parent, and Dylan and Corey really gained a lot of resentment and strife towards Mark, and Dylan in particular, especially after seeing the disgusting, disturbing photos that we mentioned earlier. After he saw those, he really lost a lot of respect for Mark as well. So the distance would continue to grow, and that really put a lot of strain on them and their relationship as father and son. And finally, they would talk to Mike Hall. Mike would claim that Mark was a shitty father and that Corey had to perform fatherly duties for Dylan. In turn, Elaine seemed to be struggling some, trying to pick up the slack for Mark. So since Mark was absent as a parent, Elaine had to double down and be, mother and father in a lot of different ways. Mike, obviously being the stepfather, could do a lot of things, but couldn't really take the place of being the father. Nonetheless, Mike Hall was a fatherly figure for both Dylan and Corey after their parents' divorce. Mike was the epitome of what a parent should be if their child is missing. He participated in community searches and organized his own searches. Mark, on the other hand, sat on his stupid bitch ass and did absolutely nothing. Like he said, the police told him not to do it, so I'm not gonna fucking do it, bitch ass fucking Mark. After Dylan had disappeared, Mike saw Mark driving down from somewhere up on Middle Mountain Road, where Dylan's remains would later be found. So, possibly Mark was returning to the scene of the dump, the scene of the crime there, where he dumped Dylan's remains. Mike would see Mark coming down from Middle Mountain Road more than one occasion, actually, because he saw him on an ATV one time and then saw him in his truck another time. And the truck that he saw him in, Mark had told police was not running. So that's even more concerning and sketchy and, I can't think of the fucking word. I don't know, the fucking just blanked off my head real hard. But very concerning that he kept telling lies to police, kept telling lies to everyone around him, and would even lie about something like, hey, my truck isn't running. Hey, this isn't happening. I'm going back up to this scene where right now people don't know, but in a couple months they're going to find my fucking son's body. Like, crazy, crazy stuff. And it's, a common thing for murderers or killers to return to the scene of the crime where they either committed the crime or where they dumped the body or a lot of things like that, whether it's to remember things, whether it's to check on the body, whether it's to ensure that things aren't found or things are found. It's very, there's a lot of psychology behind it and why killers return to crime scenes like that. So from Elaine to Mike Hall to strangers to the police, suspicion had long fallen on Mark Redwine, particularly because of Dylan's unwillingness to visit him, and partially because of Mark's uncooperative nature during the investigation. But investigators built a case against him based on several factors. Dylan's skeletal injuries. Forensic experts concluded that Dylan suffered blunt force trauma to the head. His skull had fractures indicative of a violent act or attack, so pretty much it looked like there was blunt force trauma, and the fact that an animal could have caused it was ruled out, and it looked more like a sharp, pointed object of some sort that hit Dylan in the head that caused this fracture. And with that, when the skull was found, the coroner ruled the death as a homicide, and that really started to point towards Mark as being involved in his disappearance. Canine evidence. Cadaver dogs detected the scent of human remains inside Mark Redwine's home, specifically in his living room and on his clothing. Search dogs were also used throughout the investigation to search for Dylan. The cadaver dog evidence would be the most controversial testimony during the trial. The human remains detection dog, Molly, was deceased by the time of the trial, having passed away in 2018, and it caused a lot of strife from the defense team as to whether they should allow this evidence into trial or not. Between the outside property of the house and inside the house, Molly alerted a total of 13 times on the Redwine property. She also alerted on numerous articles of Mark's clothing that were provided by Mark himself. It was the stuff that he was wearing the night of the 18th. They could see it in surveillance cameras. They knew what he was wearing. They got those clothes from Mark. And Molly would alert on these articles of clothing that Mark provided. Finally, Molly would alert on Mark's Dodge truck where the search was conducted in 2014. So they did a search around the property, and they finally got to search his truck in 2014, and Molly would alert on Mark's truck that there was human remains detected or, cadaver cadaver chemicals detected. So from that, they also used Dylan's relationship with his father against him. Testimony from Dylan's brother, Corey Redwine, suggested that Dylan had discovered disturbing photos of Mark Redwine engaging in inappropriate acts involving women's underwear and bodily waste. It was theorized that Dylan had confronted his father about these photos, leading to a violent reaction. So, These photos, there are 4 of them in total. One of them, Mark is wearing like lipstick and makeup and has a bra on and panties and stuff, and he's looking seductive in a weird way, and took a picture of himself like that. And in the other ones, he's wearing a diaper that is fucking filled with feces. He shit a diaper, and then he is shown in the final 2 photos eating his shit out of the diaper. His face has fucking feces on it. There's shit just up against his mouth. He's shown licking this diaper. I don't know what the fuck he was doing or who he was sending these to or where he was posting these fucking photos at, but disturbing, terrifying, and fucking disgusting photos, to say the very least. It was thought that Dylan may have confronted his father in November of 2012 about these photos, brought them to his attention. Mark already knew that Corey had seen the photos, but he did not know that Dylan had seen them, and it's suggested that maybe Dylan mentioned these photos or said something to his father about these photos, and Mark became enraged, infuriated, and attacked Dylan because of it. And then finally, Mark Redwine's inconsistent statements. Over the years, Mark Redwine changed his account of what happened that night, and investigators believed his stories did not add up. So he would, slightly change details. Oh, he went fishing. Oh, he fell asleep watching Nickelodeon. Oh, he slept here. Oh, he used this pillow. Oh, he did this, did that. It would just, these small details would change and change and change, trying to piece together a story that was convincing enough to get police to stop questioning him, to stop asking him this or asking him that, to get people to stop looking into him as a suspect for this crime. So despite growing suspicions, it took years to bring charges against Mark Redwine. Even through the suspicions that were growing since his disappearance in 2012, even after the remains were found in 2013 and more remains were found in 2015, even after the cadaver dog alerted on multiple areas in 2014 when they did the search, the multiple searches, even after all of these things happened, they didn't have any solid evidence that Mark Redwine was the person who did it. Even after they found little bits of blood using luminol in Mark's home, and there was, cadaver scents detected in Mark's truck, even after all of these different aspects, it took years to finally bring charges against Mark Redwine. He was arrested finally in June 2017 and charged with second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. He was extradited from Washington State back to Colorado to face trial. And he was in Washington State because he was there for work. He was a long-haul truck driver and was there taking or picking up some shit in his truck, whatever it might have been. He was there, though, on work and had to be extradited back to Colorado to face trial. The trial would be delayed multiple times due to legal motions, due to the pandemic in 2020, and finally, the trial would begin in June of 2021. So with the trial beginning, let's talk about some key moments from that trial and the results at the very end of it before we head into today's main marks and finish off the episode with our final takeaways. Alright, so during the trial, prosecutors would argue that Mark Redwine killed Dylan in a fit of rage, likely after an argument about the disturbing photos Dylan had previously found, those shit-eating photos, those lingerie photos, those weird, fucking disturbing photos of Mark in compromising situations. And that would probably be a good bet as to why Mark had killed Dylan, or maybe it was just disrespect that Dylan was showing Mark. Maybe Mark was just drunk or, drugged up or enraged for some other reason, or maybe the whole reason that Mark initially requested that Dylan come out there for Thanksgiving, maybe he had premeditated the whole thing for months. Maybe he thought he was going to kill him the entire time. Maybe he thought he was going to strangle him or hit him or beat him or whatever. Maybe he already had a plan, though. That's always a possibility as well. Mark's defense team would claim that there was no direct evidence linking Mark to Dylan's death and suggested that Dylan could have been attacked by a wild animal while walking to his friends or while walking to go fishing, attacked by a wild animal such as a bear, a coyote, a mountain lion, something of that nature. Very uncommon and very probably not practical, but it is a possibility and is something that, had to be weighed as a suggestion, as a possibility during the trial, and had to been something that investigators thought about prior to arresting Mark. Forensic experts testified that the injuries to Dylan's skull were consistent with blunt force trauma rather than an animal attack. Blood was found in multiple places within Mark Redwine's home. Blood was found under a throw rug, on the corner of a coffee table, on the love seat, on the couch, and on a pipe near the washing machine. So maybe he hit him with a pipe. Maybe he pushed him or hit him and caused him to fall and hit his head on a coffee table. There's a lot of different possibilities as what happened to Dylan, that, what caused the fractures to his skull, what blunt force trauma he really received. There's a lot of different possibilities, but forensic experts testified that the injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma rather than an animal attack. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Diane France, would testify that the bones showed signs of scavenger activity that occurred post-mortem. There are 3 time frames in perimortem analysis: antemortem, perimortem, and postmortem, which is before, during, and after death, pretty much. There were blunt force trauma marks, including a 1.6-inch fracture above the left eye. Additionally, Dr. France found 2 sharp tool marks on the zygomatic arch. These 2 sharp tool marks were determined to have happened at the perimortem time frame, so they happened during the time of death, or at the time of death, within a very close window to Dylan dying. And it's thought that Mark had cut off Dylan's head, and that's what caused these sharp tool marks on the zygomatic arch. And that's just fucking terrifying, because in reality, that's the only way that Dylan's head could have been found a mile away uphill from the rest of his remains. There's no scavengers, there's no predators that would take his remains over a mile away, his head over a mile away to consume him. They would consume him within a short distance of his remains, or where his remains were located. And these tool marks showed that Mark likely cut off Dylan's head and disposed of it in a different area for whatever reason. Maybe to just throw off investigators, maybe to hope that his skull wasn't found, maybe because without the head, they didn't have the true cause of death. They didn't know that it was blunt force trauma. They didn't know that he was, killed in that way. They didn't know that it was for sure a murder. And maybe he assumed that if they didn't find the head, or maybe if they didn't locate it in time, they wouldn't be able to tie him to Dylan's murder, or they wouldn't truly be able to say that Dylan was murdered, so they wouldn't be able to bring charges against him. It's hard to say what his thoughts were, or if this is exactly what happened, but from all testimony, from all experts looking at the case, that's the most likely thing that they came up with, was that Mark cut off Dylan's head after he had died. So right after he died, cut off his head to dispose of his body and his head separately. Dylan's mother and brother would testify about Dylan's fear of his father and how he didn't want to visit him. Mark Redwine, on the other hand, did not testify in his own defense, and during the investigation, he was evasive and lacked proper emotion, which is, it's subjective. Everyone has very different emotions that come out during stressful times, during things. Everyone expects you to be sad, to be looking for your kid, to have a lot of emotion, this and that. And some people, they shut down, or they focus incredibly hard, where they push all their emotion back and they are very serious and very, just focused on what they're doing and focused on trying to find their kid, or focused on, in Mark's case, letting the police do their investigating and trying to find Dylan. It's very subjective whether he was showing the proper emotion, but the emotions that he was showing were odd, were strange to say the least, and people started to notice that, and that was brought up during the trial as well. So with all this evidence presented, with Dylan being found, his remains being found, with Mark being the last person to see him alive, and with Mark's story really not adding up, the jury would, do deliberating, and they would find on July 16th, 2021, after a 5-week trial. It might be, it might be a little bit longer than 5 weeks. It could be shorter. I saw a couple different lengths of the trial. It's somewhere between 5 and 8 weeks. I don't know why. There was multiple articles with different lengths of the trial, but on July 16th, 2021, Mark Redwine was convicted of second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. The jury only took 6 hours to deliberate, which in a murder case is not that much. I mean, it's not the shortest time in the world either. It's not like they were an hour or less, just filled out the paperwork and boom, 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 they're done. But from what the jurors said, that they were pretty much unanimous to start, but they wanted to go over all the evidence again and then reevaluate and re-vote at the end of that. So that's really the only reason that they took so long, was to evaluate all of the evidence and then re-vote again at the end. But from the sounds of it, from jurors that talked with news articles afterwards, or news papers afterwards, that most of the jurors, if not all of the jurors, right away voted guilty for Mark. In October of 2021, Mark would be sentenced to 48 years in prison. The judge called him a monster and stated that he showed no remorse for his actions. So, Dylan's passed away. Dylan's body's been found. Thankfully, he's able to be laid to rest. Elaine, Corey, Mike, and the rest of the family, along with all of the volunteers and the random citizens that helped search for him, could get that final closure, could understand that, at least he is, I hate when people say in a better place, because obviously the best place for him to be would be with his mother and his brother and still thriving in his life, but at least they know where he's at. At least they're able to have that closure. And with that closure, with Mark being sentenced to 48 years in prison and hopefully dying in fucking prison because he's a dipshit dirtbag, with all of that, let's head out of this storyline and let's go into today's main marks. All right, number 1. Mark Redwine was born in North Carolina on August 24th, 1961. He would end up having 4 sons with 2 women, one of them being Dylan Redwine, who was born in 1999. Number 2. Mark Redwine would eventually settle near Durango, Colorado, in Vallecito, also known as Vallecito Lake. Vallecito Lake is a large scenic mountain lake in southwest Colorado and is located 18 miles northeast of Durango. It's known for its beautiful views and diverse recreational opportunities, including fishing, boating, and hiking. Number 3. Dylan was similar to many young teens. He loved texting with his friends and playing video games during his free time. Dylan also loved baseball, as it was his favorite sport, but he played football quite often as well. Number 4. Mark had a remarkable lack of concern, and it started to show to everyone around him, including the police. While Dylan was still missing, between the end of November 2012 and June 2013, Mark drove to Bayfield, Colorado, where witnesses saw Mark throw away a garbage bag. Bayfield is not terribly far from Vallecito, as I mentioned, about 13 miles, 18 minutes, less than 20 minutes away. But it didn't make any sense why Mark would go so far out of his way to throw away some garbage. I mean, it doesn't make any sense why he would go. I mean, I understand if trash service, doesn't come out to his house, that he has to go into town to whatever the dump is to throw away his trash. But it doesn't make sense why he would go so far, why he wouldn't just go to Durango to do it, because Durango is closer to him, and why he would go to Bayfield to throw away this trash. The witnesses reported the suspicious activity to the police. The police would go to the dumpster to get the bag, and the contents would be suggestive of wrongdoing and would not shed a great light on Mark in any way. They would not project a redeeming light on Mark, that's for sure. inside of the bag, inside of the fucking garbage bag that he just threw away, were photos of Dylan with long hair from the recent years and pictures of Elaine, along with an old driver's license of Mark's. So he threw away pictures of his son who is missing. Who the fuck does that? Who the fuck does that unless you killed your fucking kid? No one. No one does that shit. Even if you hated that kid, you would keep those fucking photos as memories. Like, fuck yourself, Mark. Go fuck yourself. I hope you die in prison, you bitch ass. On June 28th, 2013, number 5. On June 28th, 2013, 7 months after Dylan vanished, some of his remains were found about 10 miles away from Mark Redwine's home. These include a partial skull and the tibia, femurs, the left clavicle bone, and some of Dylan's toes. His toes were the only remains with flesh still intact. Part of his skull, the skull cap, would be found over 2 years later in November of 2015. And finally, number 6, new-ish information. Mark is a shit-eating, lying sack of garbage that did the very minimum in the search for his child. He also avoided all the searches that were conducted near Middle Mountain Road and refused to take a polygraph test when he appeared on the Dr. Phil show. He would be like, yeah, I'm going to take it. And then he would come in and be like, I don't feel good, Dr. Phil. And if you don't feel good or you aren't in the right mindset, it's an automatic disqualifier for doing polygraph testing. And he continuously refuted and rejected the opportunity to take this fucking polygraph, and it made him look even more guilty than he had already looked at that point. He would even try to convince Dr. Phil and others that Elaine may have hired a team of professionals to kidnap Dylan to hurt him, and that she may be holding him somewhere and not telling anyone about it, not informing anyone, just to hurt him more than anyone. And in all reality, the exact opposite was perpetually true. Continuously true, endlessly true, was the exact opposite, that that Mark had kidnapped or hurt Dylan and had hid him away, was holding him somewhere in reality just to hurt Elaine. And maybe it wasn't just to hurt Elaine, but he knew that it would hurt Elaine, and keeping the truth from her would just hurt her continuously. And he didn't fucking care about her. He didn't care if she hurt, and didn't care about Dylan in any fucking way at all at this point. So in reality, though he tried to convince people that Elaine may have hired a team of professionals to kidnap Dylan, the exact opposite was true, more than anything. And with that, with all this information, with Mark being such an annoying, fucking relentless sack of fucking feces that he would eat out of a dirty diaper if he had the chance, let's move from today's main marks into our final takeaways. So, Dylan Redwine's tragic murder remains a chilling case of familial violence. His father, Mark Redwine, maintained his innocence throughout the trial, but overwhelming forensic and circumstantial evidence led to his conviction. Dylan's mother, Elaine Hall, has continued to advocate for victims of child abuse, ensuring that Dylan's legacy serves as a reminder of the dangers of domestic violence. So she really pushes and tries to work with charities and different advocate groups, and just tries to be there for victims of child abuse or victims of missing children, families who have missing kids, who have had a kid who has been killed by someone, all of these different things that happen. Elaine tries to really put herself at the forefront of a lot of different charities and organizations and advocate groups that push and help these families that are hurting and that are in such pain because of something similar to what she had went through in the previous years. And with that, with Mark rotting away in fucking prison, with Dylan resting in peace finally, with Elaine, Corey, Mike, and the rest of the family getting the closure that they rightfully deserve, that's going to take us out of our episode today. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for checking out the episode. Thank you for rocking through until the very end with me. I appreciate you being here. If you haven't had the chance, please go and rate and review the show. Just take the 5 seconds, take the minute that it really takes to just throw a rating up. 5 stars would be so much appreciated. It helps the show more than I can express. And without the support, I can't build the show at all, and it's been hard enough already. I really haven't had the support that I was hoping to get from the show, and even as I've pushed and tried to build it and tried to put out really informed, well-rounded episodes, I still haven't gotten any sort of following. So it's been a little discouraging and has caused me to really take a step back from putting as much effort every week into this as I wanted to, as I was hoping to. And if I end up starting to gain that support, I would love to continue doing episodes every week. But for now, like I mentioned at the top of the show, I am going to dial back to bi-weekly just because there aren't enough people listening. There aren't enough people rating or reviewing. There aren't enough people even commenting on the show to let me know what they think of it. If I could just get some feedback, a little feedback, any feedback, if I could understand that there's even a little bit of a viewership that I have. I look at my Spotify, the account that I run, that I host this podcast through. I look at my Spotify account, where I host the podcast, and when I look in the last 30 days, I have 0 consumption hours. It's fucking depressing. And it's hard to come back every week and continue doing this when I know no one's fucking listening. So if you're listening, if you're out there, I want to say thank you so fucking much. Please take the time to rate and review the show. Please follow me on Instagram at Beneath the Shadows podcast. And if you want to support the show, hit me up on Patreon, patreon.com/Beneath the Shadows. The podcast is on there. You can also send us some money or, support us via PayPal. I'll have a link for that if anyone's interested. But beyond that, thank you for being here. Thank you for checking out the show. Come back for our next episode in 2 weeks, where we are going to Lagos, Nigeria, and we are going to check out the Badu gang or the Badu cult and the horrific, terrifying crimes that they performed towards the end of the 2010s. From 2016 on until today, there has been little groups that have kept popping up, but between 2016 and 2018 in particular, lots of murders, lots of crime. We'll delve into it next time here on Beneath the Shadows. Thank you once again for joining me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for fucking rating and reviewing the show. You're the fucking best. Have a wonderful fucking day. And until next time, keep watching out, keep being safe, keep illuminating the details that are hidden beneath the shadows. Peace, y'all.
What I care about is finding this child.
Which is all I care about.
Did you take a polygraph in this matter? Did police ask you to take a polygraph?
They did.
And what were the results?
Well, there's been some conflict as to what the actual results are.
Well, what did they tell you?
Well, they told me that I failed it.